Hello, and welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harvey.
And my name is Stephen A. Mackay.
We're both best-selling historical fiction authors, and together we chat about all things historical and anything that could fall under the banner of action and adventure in books, film, TV, and games.
Oh, and we also talk about rock music from time to time.
On that note, play the intro music that we wrote and perform ourselves. Well, and as that music finishes and fades out, what an amazing piece of music that is. As I said, written by Stephen. Genius.
Yeah.
And all the vocals, I believe, are another genius. So, and all the guitars and instruments by a Scottish genius.
Yes, that would be me.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't play the drums; I just loops. But
you shouldn't admit to not doing something. You should always take credit. Anyway, on with the show. This is episode 1. So today we thought we'd introduce ourselves and give you an idea of what you can expect from Rock, Paper, Swords. Each episode, we're going to cover different aspects of history, from the quirky to the almost unbelievable. We'll also talk about writing, not only with each other, but we'll also have great guest authors on from time to time. So both Stephen and I love podcasts, and our aim is to make this one both entertaining and enlightening. So I really hope we can do that. So without further ado, as this is the very first episode, let's introduce ourselves. So Stephen, tell us a bit about yourself.
I am now 45. I published Wolf's Head in 2013, which was a reboot of the Robin Hood legend. And it sold quite well, especially when Amazon put it under, I think it was a monthly deal at the time. So things just went from there, and I did 4 novels in that series, the Forest Lord series, a few novellas and stuff, spin-offs, things. And then I went on to my Warrior Druid of Britain series, which is set in the Dark Ages and has a nice endorsement from Matthew.
It's true. And for those listening who are not Scottish, that's the Warrior Druid series, because Stephen is afflicted by the wonderful accent. Some say afflicted, some say blessed with the accent, the Scottish accent.
Well, you love it.
I do, but from time to time I might have to interject to translate.
All right, okay.
But if anyone doesn't understand, please feel free to drop us a message on Twitter or Facebook.
Just imagine me as Billy Connolly. There's a guy from just up the road from me, so I've got a similar accent. So if you can understand Billy, I'm trying to sound a bit like Billy now.
Yeah.
I wish I was as funny and I had his hair.
I was going to say, you've got not quite as much hair as him, and you're definitely not as funny.
And he's got a tremendous beard as well, which I've always lacked, but never mind.
Anyway, I interrupted you. So tell us a bit more about the Warrior Druid series.
It's brilliant, and everyone should go and buy it. I think that's what your endorsement said, actually. Something along those lines, like anyway. Yeah. So I'm on to book 5 now, which I won't tell you the title of just yet, but it's nearly finished. And then who knows what will happen next. I've actually just got an email as we've started recording this from someone quite important. I'm desperate to read it, but I'll have to wait after the podcast now.
I can guess who this might be from, but you can tell me afterwards, perhaps. And I won't spill the beans here on the podcast, but
hopefully something quite exciting for me, something different. A change of series, change of time period, slightly.
That sounds good. That sounds very intriguing. So you won't tell us the title of the next one. You've already finished the next one, is that right? Or are
No,
you
not
still
yet.
working on it?
It's nearly finished. It's right at the very. I'm just writing the finale, kind of the kind of centerpiece scene at the end, which has been a lot of fun to write. I'll maybe explain more about that once the book comes out, but it's been a lot of good fun to write this particular scene.
Okay.
And I've got the
Great.
cover art, which is pretty good.
Oh, you'll have to at some point. You'll be announcing that and showing that off, I'm guessing, to the world.
Yeah, we'll announce
out.
announce the title on here maybe next week, and share the cover art, which I'm happy with.
Great. I'm looking forward to seeing that as well.
Oh, I also wrote for the Xbox game Hood Outlaws and Legends. They emailed me and asked if I would be interested in writing for their game, which is Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and all this. And as a gamer my whole life, I thought that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's something I'm very jealous of you actually for doing, because I'm really into games as well. And when I heard that you were doing that, and quite a few authors, that we interact with online or have met at festivals and things, like Giles Christian springs to mind, has written for or is writing for a game at the moment, and I know other people have done in the past as well. Gordon Doherty, yeah. So something I'm a bit jealous of that, but I've actually got the game. I've downloaded the game on PlayStation. Right. It was actually a PlayStation sort of monthly.
Yeah, it's free. They do this
sort of. Yeah, they do this thing that if you're signed up for PlayStation Plus or something, you get this. You get free games, and so I've downloaded it, or I've got it anyway. So I'll need to play it at some point.
Well, I hope you like it. I liked it for a while, but I'm not very good at online games, and once I started getting thrashed, I get fed up with it. So, Matthew, your first book was The Serpent Sword, which, funnily enough, I endorsed. It sounds like we're just in an old pals act there because we're endorsing each other's book, but we never even knew each other at the time when you sent me the book. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good book.
Well, that's true. And I'm forever indebted to you and to all the other authors that I contacted out of the blue and got them to endorse The Serpent Sword, because I think it made a huge difference to the sales when I originally, self-published that book originally. And I mean, just out of, I don't know, apropos nothing, we still don't know each other face to face apart from on Zoom. We've never actually met in person, as it were. So I think maybe one day that will happen. But we've just for people listening, if they're interested, we've grown to sort of know each other via Zoom and Messenger and Twitter and Facebook over the years, but never had the pleasure of actually being in the same room.
Friends.
Yeah, online buddies, and now
only
it's blossomed.
Kind of friends I have.
Well, yeah, it's not helped by the fact that you're in Glasgow and I'm in Wiltshire, so we are quite a distance away. But one day we'll arrange to meet, I'm sure. But yeah, so just going back to The Serpent Sword, that's the first book, 2015. I think I self-published that originally. And I know I did, but it was 2015, I think it was. I self-published the first couple of books in the series, and then I've moved into traditional publishing. And now, so that's the Bernicia Chronicles, is that series, following a main character called Bearbrand, set in the 7th century. And I've just, last year, published book 8 in that series, which is For Lord and Land, and book 9 is out in December in that series, and that's Forest of Foes. And I've written also another couple of books in a different series, which is set into the early Viking period, and that's A Time for Swords series, and the first book of that is A Time for Swords. And I've written a standalone as well called Wolf of Wessex, which is set in the 9th century in, strangely enough, Wessex, which is where I live. So that's the only one of my books that's set actually close to where I live, and it features an aging warrior and his dog walking around the countryside, which, strangely enough, coincided, me writing it 2 months after we got our dog, and the aging writer that I am was seen walking around the countryside of Wiltshire. Perhaps
it also sounds slightly like the Druid.
Strangely
walking
enough,
around with his dog.
Strangely enough, again, one of these things of serendipity was, I remember it was about that time that you sent me a copy, or when I think I just finished Wolf of Wessex, and I was just in the process of getting it published or edited or something. And I remember you sent me the Druid, your first Druid book. It's called The Druid, isn't it? The first one.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and thinking, and going back to you and basically saying, the two of us saying, what? Why have we both got these guys go around the dog, sort of warhound, and both of them kind of rescuing a young girl as well.
That's right. Yeah, it was very similar.
Similarities, and we're thinking, wow, and we didn't confer about it at all.
And we both own war dogs of our own now.
We do. My war dog, of course, which if people follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you can see many photos of my war dog, and he's called Blue. He's 4 years old, and he is. I think he likes to think that he's a war dog. He's half border collie. He's half border collie, and border collies are quite, they can be quite defensive.
Yeah,
they're growly, and he gets quite snappy at other dogs that he doesn't like. Big dogs he doesn't like. Yeah. But he's half border collie and half miniature poodle. So I'm just going to leave that there.
Leave that there.
And what about your dog?
Peppy. She's a year and a half now, and when she's in the garden, she's a war dog. Anybody comes near, she's absolute aggressive as in. As soon as you walk out the garden.
How big is she? What sort of breed is she? Because she's big, terrifying.
Terrifying, yeah. She's a cross between a Jack Russell and a Chihuahua. So she's good for sitting in your lap as you're working on your novels. She's a very good wee dog.
Yeah. So so they're both of our scary hounds, which both like to think that they're vicious and very dangerous, in the same way that we probably like to imagine that we are as cool and hard as the warriors that we write about in our books.
Well, I am.
I'm going to make no comment about that. I've never met you face to face, so I'm scared of saying anything negative.
But you should be.
When I meet you,
you should be.
You might beat me up.
Yeah. Well, I'm Scottish, and everybody knows Scottish people are hard. It's the accent.
That is true.
So,
and you'll want your freedom.
Well, yeah, I certainly want my freedom. But when you did the standalone, I think you told me you were writing a standalone, and it was like the very next day it came into my head that I should write a standalone, and I wrote Lucia, which is my Roman slave novel. It's the only standalone novel that I've written. And
funnily enough, it's the Wolf of Wessex is the only standalone novel I've written as well. So it's a bit of a strange one.
I've never really thought about it before. We do kind of have a very similar career path, although you're found a publisher, which I never really did. Most of mine are self-published, but I mean, we've both done pretty okay out it.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you're now a hybrid author, really, aren't you? You've got some things that are traditionally published, and most
Audible
stuff is self-published. But
one and stuff, yeah.
But it feels to me now. Yeah, we're both doing all right. I mean, both full-time writers now, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that we're living the dream, as they say. And now we've even got our own podcast.
And it's the best podcast I've ever listened to. Well, I hope it is when I edit it anyway.
It better be good.
At least I know the music's good.
That's true. That is true. So Lucia came as a bit of inspiration when, just because I said I'd written a standalone, and you decided to obviously copy me. But then you had the idea of this novel about Lucia. But why did you choose the Robin Hood series originally?
Well, I used to be a meter reader. For 18 years I was a meter reader, just up until like a month ago, and I'd done an Open University degree, and I was always reading like Bernard Cornwell books and Ben Kane and things like that. When I finished the degree, I thought, well, what will I do now to fill my time while I'm in the car on my own at work? And I thought, I'll write a book, but I never knew what to write about. So I knew I wanted it to be about like set in Britain, Bernard Cornwell type of stuff, King Arthur type thing. But I couldn't think of anything to write about. And I drove down the road to go to my next job to read their meter, and the house was called Sherwood. So, I mean, I never really had any choice then, did I?
Well, that's no, and so I know that later on you didn't actually set it in Sherwood Forest, did you? You went a bit off-piste.
Well, Yeah, once I started researching it, I realised that a lot of the very early ballads were set further north in Barnsdale. So that gave me something to make it a wee bit different from every other Robin Hood kind of reboot or whatever. So if you are interested in Robin Hood, mine are slightly different, but I like to think they're based more on the real story. Although, of course, there isn't really any real person or anything, I'm sure, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And on yours, you set yours in a very similar time also to Bernard Cornwell. Well, maybe not a similar time, but well, kind of isn't it? But it's similar kind of themes, and it's even in the same place.
Yeah. For my sins, and that's an interesting one because I also was inspired by Bernard Cornwell. We write, you and I both write similar books. I mean, that's why we've got the podcast together as well. It's action adventure set in historical times. Very similar, I guess, to Bernard Cornwell. We would expect, people that like his books to like ours, hopefully, and vice versa. And so I was inspired by Bernard Cornwell to a large extent as well, and other writers like David Gemmell that I'd read a lot of as well. Less historical, his more fantasy, but the same sort of heroic adventure.
It's very similar, and these are great author. His heroes are fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And so those are two huge inspirations for me. And I'd read the Arthurian novels in the 90s. Which the Bernard Cornwell's Arthurian novels, which I love, those the trilogy. And I started writing The Serpent Sword back in 2001 when I saw a documentary about some graves being dug up just to the south of Bamborough Castle. And they talked about the fact that these graves dated back from the 7th and 8th centuries and how Bamborough was a place called Bebbanburg at that time, and it was the capital of the Kingdom of Bernicia. And I didn't know anything about that, but I'd lived up in that area for a few years as a child. And so I sort of knew the area, and it always sort of stuck with me. I liked the coastline there and the rocky cliffs just to the south of there, and the crag with Bamborough on it and everything. And so something just clicked, and I just started writing. I didn't really have any ambitions to write before then. I was sort of written a bit, but something happened, and I sat down and started writing that day, The Serpent Sword. And it wasn't for another 3 years. I hadn't finished the book because I wasn't aware of how long it was going to take me, because I didn't know anything about the history. And like you, I had to start researching, the history and get into it. And I was working full time and had kids and stuff. And by the time I was probably about a quarter of the way through writing the novel, and then Bernard Cornwell brought out The Last Kingdom. So I'd like to think that, Bernard obviously copied me in writing set in Bamborough, but as I hadn't actually published the novel by that point, but I was so disheartened by it all that I stopped writing for years.
Oh, really?
I actually thought, I didn't write until 2013, I think.
I wondered, because it was a big gap between you starting to write it and actually putting it out.
Yeah, so I'd written about a quarter of it, then I put it away and I didn't pick it up. I think it was 2013. And I heard on the radio about self-publishing, and they were talking about E.L. James and the 50 Shades of Grey that she self-published. And the fact that she was selling...
self-published.
Yeah, originally it was. It was originally fan fiction. It was actually fan fiction for the Twilight series. And originally the guy was a vampire. And then she reworked it to be like a standalone novel.
Right.
And she self-published it. And she was selling. I mean, they said this thing. They said about this whole thing of Kindle and self-publishing, which I wasn't really aware at the time much about it, because it was quite early days then, like back in 2012 or whenever it was. And she was making like £1 million a month or something ridiculous, huge amounts of money. And I just thought, oh, you know what? I should finish this book.
You could easily do that.
I thought, well, I could easily finish a book. I thought, well, at the end of the day, I should write this book, because even if I didn't realize there was this thing called self-publishing. And so that all sort of clicked, and I thought, right, I can do that. And then I finished it in six or 7 months. I finished the book. I gave myself some targets and just buckled down. And then, as I say, the rest is history. But it takes a lot of effort, as you know, to move further, through it and actually get it published. And even if you're self-publishing and getting it out there, sending it to people like you at the time you'd already published, and other published writers, and getting them to endorse it and all of that. But yeah, eventually got it was out a good book.
And I can actually still remember the street I was in. Again, I go back to my work. I was in a street in Mulgai in Glasgow reading your book, and it sticks in my mind. There's Ben Kane has a book similar that I remember where I was when I was reading it. And then it's cool. A good book because it was years ago. It's stuck in my head all that time.
That must have been 2014 2014 or 2013 or something, 2014 maybe,
Yeah,
when I
something
sent that
like
to
that,
you. It
yeah.
must have been. It's a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, because I
So I
put
think-
Will Said out in 2013, so it was obviously after that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because it must have been, because I published in April 2015, so it would have been a few months before then I would have sent it out. But yeah, so yeah, that trip down memory lane. So what are you working on at the moment? You mentioned that this last one of the is it the last one or the fifth one of the Druid?
The fifth
Warrior?
one, I don't have any idea when there'll be a last one in the series, because the characters are really young and everything seems, I don't do this on purpose, but all the events in my books, the Druid books in particular, seem to take place like within a year of each other. You know, it's like, you know, because they had the war cycle, didn't they, in the Dark Ages or the post-Roman Britain, you know, where everyone would wind down for the winter and the warriors would just sit around drinking and eating and fighting and doing other stuff, fun stuff for the winter. And then they would come back out and do other fun stuff, fighting each other in the summer. So
stealing cattle from each other.
Stealing cattle and sheep and all this good stuff that we still do to this day in Scotland.
Steal people's iron brew.
Oh, no, the less said about that, the better.
Okay.
Remove the sugar, so
okay.
I don't want to talk about that. It's a kind of sore point for me.
Sorry.
Most Scotsmen. I'm not going to get endorsed by them now anyway.
No, that's right. You've ruined it. I was already preparing that. I was laying the groundwork for that endorsement.
So where were we? Lost my thread there.
So your books cover about a year.
Yeah.
Each
so
time.
So this one's kind of set again right after the last one, The Bear of Britain, finished. This one kind of follows straight on again. It could basically just be one big long book. So I don't know when the series will ever end, if I'm enjoying it. Some people might die. And
so here's a question for you then. So I often get asked this question. So when you're writing a series and you're in the fifth book now, and I've written the 9th book of the Benicia Chronicles, and I'm already sort of got a synopsis for the 10th book that I've been working on. So the question that I often get asked is, do you have this overarching sort of plan? And it sounds like you don't, but do you have this overarching plan of what's going to happen, over the next 20 years or whatever?
Not for this series. I did for the Robin Hood one, which is quite good.
Okay.
Because obviously certain things that happened, the Golden Arrow, Silver Arrow, or whatever, certain characters came in and died. There's certain things in the Robin Hood legend, pardon me, that you have to have in it. So that kind of gave me a good framework. So as a debut author, just starting out and trying to learn your trade, that was quite good. Although it was supposed to be a trilogy, and it ended up with 4 books because I just get carried away in the second book, and I just had so much fun. I don't know if anybody's actually read the books. The section where Friar Tuck gets hit with a crossbow bolt and falls in the river, it was supposed to be Much, who everybody knows, the miller's son. He was supposed to get shot with a crossbow bolt and die because I hated his name, Much. It's just such a stupid name. I don't like it, and I never did. So I wanted rid of him as soon as possible. I like the character, but I just hated that name Much, and it just never seemed to fit. And so he was going to die. And then when I was writing it, for some reason, it just ended up Tuck took the hit instead, and I ended up getting a whole other book out of it. And that second book was probably my favourite book I've ever written. So there was a kind of overarching theme, an idea there, how everything would pan out. And even then, I still managed to add another book on it then.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how those things happen. Like just how a tiny decision can create a whole another book.
Unplanned.
Yeah, because
that's
a similar
magic
thing. Yeah, that is the magic. And it's a similar thing with me. I mean, I have it. I'm trying to think of examples where it's actually been me that's caused it, like by actions in the book. But there are moments like that actually. I mean, if people have read the 8th novel, For Lord and Land, there's a character that comes back that was, I think, last time was in book 5. They appeared in book 5, and at the end of book 5 they sort of go away, and then something happened. I just thought, I could bring this person back, and it, and suddenly all the sort of things just begin to fall into place. And
so you'd forgotten about him, hadn't you?
Well, kind of. They were basically, it was just a character that had a means to an end within the. I don't want to give too much away if anyone is going to read it, because it's sort of twists and stuff. But it's a female character actually, and they had like a a means to an end. They had a story arc within the 5th book, and by the end of the 5th book, they went away and they disappeared, and that was it. And they went off into the sunset, and that was almost literally they sort of walked away, and they left behind them the aftermath of their actions. And so there was always, in my mind,
it's like they come to life. It's like the characters come to life, and they just kind of do their own thing, and you just have to go with it.
And
I think that's what makes it so good.
Yeah. In the 8th book, she's come back, and there's this whole. I've had to sort of fill in the backstory of these three books in between, and all this stuff has happened to her, and she was kind of she wasn't the main character. She was a side character in that, but she obviously becomes more important in the 8th book, and sort of the whole. I'd say like half the book really is about her journey and her story. And a couple of people have commented. That they didn't like it, the fact that it sort of dragged the story that way. But what can you do?
You can't please everybody all the time.
It's just I just read a review the other day. Somebody said it's the first time they've read a book of mine that I've done a split storyline. So I've got like the two sort of protagonists basically, and they split up and it all pulls back together towards the end of the book. And they said they didn't like it. I mean, it's only one negative review out of all the other positive reviews, but they're always the ones that stick with you, right?
I did that in some of the Robin Hood books, and then I didn't do it in one of the books, and somebody left a bad review saying they missed it.
What can you do? The thing
is, I think that's
what
you can write.
I think increasingly that the negative reviews, as long as the book is of a reasonable quality and you can write whatever, I think increasingly the negative reviews say a lot more about the reader, and positive reviews too. It's the wrong book for that reader at that time, perhaps. As well.
Well, that's a good point, because when I read Dune first, I don't know how old I was about 14 or 15.
Yeah,
I hated it. I thought it was a complete pile of rubbish, and I went back to it about 3 or 4 years later, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. One of the best books I'd ever read. And again, I read it when I was about 30, and again when I was about 40. And I just, every time
you're
I
a different person.
Exactly, you really are a different. Yeah. So, I mean, as long as all we can do is continue to try and be putting out the quality that you start with, hopefully it doesn't drop, because obviously, especially you're on the 9th book now.
Yeah.
And it's in the same series with the same characters. If you don't know what you're doing, people could get bored. But
I'm at
the same time,
that,
if people love the characters, all you have to do is keep finding interesting situations to put them in. That's the hard part.
Well, I think that exactly it is the hard part. I've always said the hard part is actually finding the plots, making the plots, and my plots tend to be quite straightforward, but with a few twists. There's got to be some twists. There's got to be something that people know this, where it's going, but there's got to be enough twists that people go like, oh, I didn't expect that. If there's nothing like that in the whole book, I think it gets boring. So you tend to know that the good guy or the main character is going to survive, right? I mean, that's what people expect in a book. But it's good to throw in some moments of jeopardy where it feels like they really might not survive. And I've had my favorite moments when people have written to me. And it's actually happened in this last book that's not been published yet, in Forest of Foes. A couple of my beta readers have got back and said, I really didn't know what was going to happen. I thought that everyone was going to get killed. Because I have killed off some characters throughout the series. And sometimes people have complained a lot, in particular about certain characters getting killed. They say, my goodness, how did you kill them? I'm thinking, these guys are professional warriors. They're fighting every book. They're fighting people all the time. You really think
they have to get hurt at some point?
You think that nobody's going to die? I mean, it doesn't make sense. They're not like superheroes. Even superheroes, right? These die because you need to give some jeopardy to it. If they never get hurt, then there's no point.
But even in that kind of situation where there's a big twist, you probably didn't even know about it when you were writing the book. It just probably happened. I've done that myself. And then you still get a review that says, oh, this book was so predictable. And you think, how did you know what was coming? I wrote it and I never even knew what was going to come.
Yeah, I like those reviews where they say, I know exactly what the writer was doing. Yeah. They've done this and they wrote this with the idea that this was going to be political, just whatever. You really think, really? I didn't have any thoughts about that. But anyway.
Yeah, they go to, well, not that deep really. Just want to write about fighting and having fun and eating sweetmeats.
So So I think we're probably coming towards the end of this first episode.
One.
Yeah, episode 1 of Rock, Paper, Swords. But yeah, I just thought we should finish on the regular slots that we're going to have. So each episode, I thought we could finish with certain questions that we can answer, and our guests, if we've got guests on, we can answer too. And the first of which is, what are you reading at the moment? And that could be non-fiction and fiction, or both, one of each.
Oh, you read more than one book at a time?
You never know.
You're a clever man.
I'm holding a non-fiction book in the left hand and a fiction book in the right. I read them at the same time, literally at the same time. Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, I'm reading your book, A Time for Swords.
Ah, yeah.
Which is, I've been reading for about a year and a half now.
It's like the never-ending story for you, isn't it?
It's a really good book. I just can't find time, because last night I was reading, I don't even remember what the book's called, The Search for Merlin, I think, by Tolstoy. And it's a book I read when I started researching the Druid. This is a non-fiction book, and there's a lot of really, really good stuff in it about Druids and Merlin and things like that I like to just add into my books to spice them up a wee bit of flavour, you know. So I had to read that last night to find some things, whereas I've liked to read your A Time for Swords. So this is what always happens.
Thank you for the plug. But I feel the same. I feel the same way. I mean, I'm so you read it. So there's your two books, right? You've got The Search for Merlin.
Yeah, no, I was only kidding on. I'm actually reading a lot more than two, because I've got John Gwynne.
Don't give it all away now. Save it for the next episode.
I suppose that's a good point.
Well, I'm reading. So in the same way as you, I've been reading one of the books I'm reading. I've been reading for a long time, longer than I should have been reading it for. But it's actually really good. Again, I'm enjoying it, but I'm just struggling to find the time to read it. I think it's a bit of a busman's holiday, the reading. You obviously, we start writing because we love reading.
Yeah.
But then when you're writing all day and reading non-fiction stuff to find out information for the research.
Yeah, you need a bit of a break.
It's much easier to sit down and just watch a bit of telly at the end of the day, or something else, or play a game on the PS4 or something, than it is to sit down and read a book. So I'll read a couple of chapters if I'm lucky, or a couple of pages if I'm lucky, in bed, and then I fall asleep.
Yeah,
I'm reading a book called Oathbound by I haven't written his name down, but it's Richard Cullen, and he's published by Head of Zeus, same publisher as me. It was actually longlisted for the Wilbur Smith Action Adventure Writing Award this year, which hasn't been judged yet, but it was longlisted, but it hasn't been shortlisted, I think, unfortunately. But I was already reading it before that came out. But anyway, it's the first in the Wolf of Kings series, and the sequel of which is out, I think, now or very soon, like in a few weeks. It's called Shield Breaker, the sequel. Anyway, it's I think it's the first books that he's written under that name of Richard Cullen, but I think he's written other books as R.S. Ford. I think it's some fantasy novels. So he's like a debut novelist that's not really a debut novelist, and you can tell, you know, the skill level's good. He's a good writer. It's set in around the time of the Battle of Hastings, so the end of the 11th century or second half of the 11th century, and it's all about a character called, I think it's pronounced Sturkar, something like that. He's a Dane who's joined the Anglo-Saxons, basically, very reminiscent of Utrecht.
Yeah,
I guess.
That sounds familiar.
So, you know, if it works, why not? Anyway, it's good. It's good, yeah. And he's he's known as the Red Wolf, and he goes off, you know, killing everybody and fighting all over the place, and lots of action, lots of adventure, lots of daring do and short chapters, which I know you're a fan of as well.
Yeah, good escapism there.
So
the sounds of it.
And the non-fiction books that I've been reading, which give an insight into what I've been working on over the last few weeks. I've been reading Historical Atlas of the American West by Warren A. Beck and Inez D. Haas. So that is a historical atlas. So it's good. It's like I've got a couple of historical atlases. I've got one of the Anglo-Saxon period as well. And I think I've got the same one, actually. I saw it on your Facebook page, so I bought it. And so it's like that. So it'll give like a map of America, sort of saying the Indian territories from the evolution of the Indian territories over certain periods of time, or
you mean Native American?
No, because it's actually a place. It's called the Indian Territories, my friend.
All right, okay.
So
we can leave that, and then
don't try and cancel me. I did think about that when I was saying it, but yeah, there's all sorts of that. So these are headings, right? Which in the book, so that we're allowed to call them, because that's what they called them, quoting the Indian lands. Actually, is in there. But anyway, yeah. Whether you want to talk about the Native Americans, obviously the First Nations, but yeah, it's got all different maps like that. So you've got battles between Indian forces and the U.S. Army, battles of the Civil War, the Mexican War, the territorial expansion. So it's things like that. So it shows you in like cattle. Overland mail and connecting lines, so it's interesting stuff.
So your next project is a country and western album.
Is going to be a country western album, of which you're playing all the guitars. You're writing the songs.
That would be a interesting country and western album.
It would be. So that gives some insight into what I was working on. I'm not actually working on, well, sort of, we can talk about it maybe in a later date. I wrote a novella set in the Wild West, as it is known. But I decided, since I'm not going to publish it, actually, so I could give myself a little mini plug for my Patreon here. If anyone wants to read it, I'm releasing it bit by bit on my Patreon, on my Patreon, well, for patrons over the second tier, the Yesith tier, can read it, because I decided not to publish it because I don't think it's actually good enough or right. I don't think the moment's right to publish it. There's certain themes that could be difficult, but yeah, using it as research for a novel that I hope to write sometime in the future, which
sounds very interesting. It's a bit different for you.
Yeah, a bit different. So researching 19th century stuff at the moment. So moving on to the what are you listening to slot. Well,
for the past couple of weeks, it's been the new Def Leppard album. We have to mention this, obviously, because it's rock, paper, swords. So a bit of rock. Although the new Def Leppard album isn't really that much rock, but it's quite good. It's got some good songs, really good songs, actually, some of them. It's not particularly hard rock that I like, but it's a good album.
Like action and adventure, though, rock encompasses a very broad church of music, of styles. You can go punk rock, glam rock,
pop
heavy
rock, I think.
rock, pop rock. You can go, there's all sorts.
I prefer the hard rock end, but it's a good pop rock album. So if you like old Def Leppard, pour some sugar in me, you might like this. What have you been? What have you been listening to? I'm not pouring any
sugar on you, but
don't say that.
So there's two, a bit like the fiction, the non-fiction and the fiction novel. I thought I would give an instrumental version for when I'm writing, because I like to listen to instrumental music when I'm writing, or sort of stuff with no lyrics. So I'm going to say one thing that I've been listening to whilst I'm actually writing, and another thing I've been listening to in the car or for musical pleasure when not actually writing and needing to concentrate. So I've been listening to the soundtrack for the movie, the movie's Wyatt Earp. So the Kevin Costner movie Wyatt Earp that came out in 93, 94, something like that. And again, obviously that's linked to what I was writing. I often like to listen to things that are linked in some way to,
it gets you in the mood.
Thematically.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the movie Wyatt Earp,
I can't remember if I have or not.
Directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who's amazing, and it's got many great actors in it. Dennis Quaid is in it as Doc Holliday. Came out really at the same time, very close to Tombstone, the movie. Both
that's a good movie.
So they came out like the same year, and it covers lots of the same ground. But my feeling is, if you squeeze the two movies together, you'd kind of get the perfect Wyatt Earp movie. But definitely worth a watch. And I've been listening to, in terms of rock, for the rock, paper, swords, I've been listening to, again, a bit on the softer scale than you would like, but I've been listening to Queen.
I knew you would say Queen.
Adam Lambert. But the main reason is, well, there's two main reasons. One, because Queen is my favourite band of all time, although having listened to them ad nauseum extensively since I was about 12, I don't listen to them all the time now, because there comes a point of saturation. But I did go and see Adam Lambert and Queen perform last week in the O2 in London. So obviously I had to listen to them a few times around that. And the day after, you can't, when you come back from
you get through a wee phase, I know what you mean.
You can't not listen to the band you've just seen if they were good, and they are amazing. And anybody who hasn't seen Queen live, I mean, wow. Whatever frontman they've got, they're still amazing. So
I don't like Brian May's guitar playing. He's a good guitar player.
He's amazing. And then in their mid-70s, and honestly, they rock harder than most people half their age. I mean, incredible gig. Really
I love fat bottom girls, even Freddie Mercury.
That's true. And
apparently,
even Adam Lambert, who I'm pretty sure is maybe not actually into the girls that much, but he definitely likes singing about the fat bottom girls.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? We all love that. So, lastly, on our regular outro slots, what are you watching? Or what have you been watching?
Well, it's not really historical at all. It kind of is. Stranger Things.
Is it action? Is it action and adventure?
Well, it's historical, Stranger Things, because it's nostalgia. So it's historical to the likes of my daughter. She's only 14, so she's never lived through that period the way we did. And it's certainly got action in it. So yeah, I'm quite enjoying the new series of Stranger Things. I've enjoyed all of them up to, especially when they start with the music and it's Motley Crue and stuff, and I can turn to my daughter and say, "There you go, that's the real stuff there." Shout at the devil.
That's like Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai.
Exactly. My daughter's been watching that. As I say, she's only 14 and she's been watching Stranger Things and Cobra Kai, and I saw this really cool music. And I don't particularly like Cobra Kai. It's a bit childish for me, and the fight scenes are really bad.
It's fun though, isn't it? It's fun. It's like
it's
fun
also
for all the family.
Well, it is. It's fun. Yeah, but it's not so much fun when your daughter tells you that Daniel LaRusso looks the same age as you. And you're 45 and he's 60.
Yeah.
And he actually looks younger than me because he's got a good full head of hair.
He does look younger than you, and he's slimmer than you, looks younger than you.
Yeah, he looks great. Handsome man.
What can I say? He looks very similar to me. I'm sure most people would agree. So I've watched. So I obviously watched loads of TV as well because that's what we all do now in the 21st century. But I actually went to the cinema in the last week and saw what everybody's watching, and it's definitely not historical, but it is action and adventure, and it's nostalgic, and that is Top Gun Maverick. And it was fantastic. Again, really, really good. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. If you've
better than the first one, because I would rewatch the first one, it just seemed to be a lot of half-naked men running about.
Well, that's possibly why I like it. That's possibly why I liked it.
Right.
And
okay.
It definitely has got a scene of lots of oiled up young men playing. This time they're doing like touch American football or something. You know,
okay, sounds contact, but
on the beach. On the beach, all oiled up, the same, very similar. There's a girl, but she's seems to be fully watching clothed. Them. No, she seems to be fully clothed. The female pilot, she's got all her clothes on, but all the guys are like half naked running around.
Okay.
And even Tom Cruise joins in as well at the age of like 59 or whatever. That he was probably 57 when they filmed it. But you know, I'm 51 and he's like 57 and looks about 25. He looks the same as he did in Top Gun. I mean, it's ridiculous, you know. And he's running around playing football with all these 20-year-olds. But the film is great. There's a load of nods to the original movie. If you like the original movie, you'll love it. It's better than the original movie, I'd say. And it manages it manages to kind of tick lots of boxes and makes it just sort of, it hits lots of emotional spots. It's not, I mean, don't go in expecting, you know, don't go in expecting high art, whatever. But it's really well crafted movie. Great fun, and you come out of it feeling like that's a proper 80s style blockbuster movie done well.
Sounds like my wife would like it, so
honestly, my wife loved it.
Maybe I'll send her. I'll stay here and watch Stranger Things.
Right. Okay. Moving on quickly. That's it for today, folks. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Please let us know if you have any questions or anything that you'd like for us to cover in future episodes.
And hopefully there'll be less waffle next time as we hone our craft.
You never know.
Maybe more waffle.
Perhaps more waffle. You can stop waffling. You can contact us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com Rock Paper Swords Podcast, all one word. Or we're on Twitter as well at rock_swords. You can find out more about Stephen and me on our websites. So that's matthewharvey.com, all one word, or stephenamackay.com, all one word as well. We're both on Twitter and Facebook as well, and we'd love to hear from readers and listeners, so drop by and say hello. Yeah, in case you missed it at the beginning, the theme tune that you're about to hear as we go into the outro was written and performed by us. All the instruments are played by Stephen, and all the vocals are me. So until next time, a rock, paper, swords. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.